Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program, your Sunday edition for July 15th, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you from Austin, Texas. For now, I will be on the road down to Milwaukee tomorrow morning, but obviously the news today is the further investigation into the assassination attempt of 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump, at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania yesterday. Many of you are realizing now that do not subscribe to our Patreon that this is an episode you are getting. I have decided that the news value of this moment and the serious nature of it is something that does indeed transcend the paywall. If there is anybody who does support the show that has an issue, then you can please feel free to email me. We will make it right. theyoungamerican@gmail.com. With that being said, here's what you need to know. The shooter has been identified. He is 20-year-old Thomas Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. That is a middle to upper class suburb of Pittsburgh, south of Butler. The gun that was used to fire on Donald Trump was legally obtained by Crooks's father. And authorities have said that they have found explosive devices in Crooks's vehicle as well as his home. Crooks is, according to databases, a registered Republican in the state of Pennsylvania, although he never cast a vote. And during the inauguration of Joe Biden, Crooks donated $15 to an affiliated super PAC, and that's what we know. I very firmly believe that we should not read too much into the motivations of shooters, especially political shooters, especially if we are going to then use that information to try to further our own political aims. There will be a community for everybody on the internet because we are the thousands and thousands of proverbial monkeys that are typing into keyboards, creating every possible nook and cranny of political opinion. That should not be a shock. But I will take a wild guess and say that what led Crooks to pull that trigger yesterday had something more to do with a frivolous element of his own personal and deranged life, which he himself ended, than it does anything close to mainstream political thought. And with that, I would like to move on and tell you another name, somebody that died in the attack. He died almost instantly, and that is Corey Compratore. He was a resident of Western Pennsylvania, a firefighter, and a father. He was very excited to go to the Trump rally, and indeed the last tweet that he put out was to noted Trump influencer Cat Turd 2. He is survived by his children, and his loss of life is an absolute tragedy. Before we get into any of the clips from the Sunday shows, and we are going to play a few, although I don't know if they are illuminating as much as they are a general and consistent chorus, I do want to say the following. We came very, very, very close to being in a world that was very, very, very dark. The assassin's bullet that eventually killed one man and has left two as yet unidentified residents in critical condition in the hospital was only an inch away from caving in the skull of a former president and current frontrunner on a stage in broad daylight with global media broadcasting it live and the world's most talented political photojournalist taking pictures. This is, without a question, the most documented assassination attempt in history. It really can't be compared to much. And should it have been successful, it would have left us in a very precarious position, one in which a currently very conspiratorial political atmosphere would have had a lot more devastating questions to wrestle with. Not only why the Secret Service left one of the only vantage points that could possibly shoot at Donald Trump open, but also who made that order. Was it simple mistake or was it something more nefarious? I'm not here to say that. There will be plenty of voices that will make those discussions very much the center of their personality over the next few months. All I am here to say is that if Donald Trump were dead, a large portion of the American electorate would believe that either through negligence or malice, the sitting president of the United States is culpable. And when you have that level of vitriol between the elements of our spectrum, we get into really dark times. And so while what is going to happen over the next weeks and months are very serious, and we're going to play a lot of conversation here about turning down the temperature of our rhetoric, it's a conversation worth having. I just want to let you know, as I sit here, it is a great, great feeling to know that we are in this splinter universe and not the splinter universe 1 inch away. And with that, let's go to the clips. This is Meet the Press. Bernie Sanders talking about political rhetoric in general.
You obviously have been impacted by political violence yourself in 2017. That horrible moment when Republican Congressman Steve Scalise was shot at baseball practice. You came out and forcefully denounced what had happened upon learning that the suspected shooter had been a volunteer for your campaign. How does that experience inform how you think the country can move forward right now?
Well, let me also say that a couple of months ago, my office right here in Burlington, Vermont, with 7, I was not there at the moment, but there were 7 staff members there, was almost burned down by somebody who's in jail right now. 7 people could have been burned alive. So yeah, I am familiar with political violence in all its forms. The bottom line is what we need as a nation, what a democracy is about, is not radical rhetoric. What it is about is a serious discussion of where we are as a nation and how we go forward. You know, in a certain way, Kristen, politics should be kind of boring. You know, our healthcare system is dysfunctional. How do we fix it? Well, it's kind of a boring discussion, but we need a healthcare system that guarantees healthcare to all people. We have massive income and wealth inequality. Well, maybe a boring discussion. Should 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society? So I think what we have got to see is serious discussion of serious issues and not this kind of harsh rhetoric that we have heard for the last number of years.
Obviously, Bernie Sanders is somebody that has a populist appeal for a reason. He is somebody that you feel is more of a normal person than he is a sociopathic politician. And there is a lot that I agree with in terms of policy. Policy should indeed be boring. Politics is about persuasion, but that doesn't mean that we have to be in the situation that we are now. Although, let me pause as we go forward and just say this. I don't believe that mainstream political conversation, even political conversation that I find to be hyperbolic, and let me be honest, I find the conversation that we are having right now hyperbolic. I think that the license you get in terms of political persuasion is being used at a very aggressive level. I don't believe that the media has that kind of power, and I don't believe that politicians have that kind of power. I think that oftentimes when you get situations like this, it is because of deeper-seated problems, deeper-seated rot. But what we can focus on is making our political dialogue something that is at the very least nutritious on some level. Something a little closer to a coherent argument as opposed to two totally divergent worlds. Let's listen to Lindsey Graham, also on Meet the Press.
Can you tell us what your initial reaction was when you witnessed what happened, when you learned what had happened, when you understood that he came, quite frankly, within inches? If his head had turned in either direction, this could be a different conversation today, Senator.
I wish I could say I was surprised, but I've been worried about this for a very, very long time. You know, if he wins, democracy is not going to end. He's not a fascist. He represents a point of view that millions share. The rhetoric is way too hot, but I was just grateful that he made it. I mean, fate stepped in, God, the hand of God, call it whatever you like. But let's don't forget, there's a man who lost his life by attending a political rally. He's dead. His life came to end. Other people are hurt. Who to blame? Let's blame the shooter, but let's all try to do better. I can tell you one thing about President Trump. He is very determined to get this country back on track, and his initial reaction after being shot will be an iconic moment in American history. Literally bleeding from a gunshot wound, he raised his fist. Don't give up. Keep going.
When I talk about two different realities, I mean, look at the conversations that are happening right now. Donald Trump is very focused on the border, the economy. Those are the two biggest things that he talks about. Every single rally. In fact, he was in the process of pointing out immigration statistics on his gigantic screens when the assassin fired his bullets. Is Donald Trump being hyperbolic about the possibility of violence when he talks about that there's a bloodbath coming? Yes. Does that mean that there is not a problem? No, because the effects of this kind of broken asylum system is something that has now become a mainstream issue. When you see majority support for deportations in America, it means that fundamentally this issue has changed. So the language is very, very hot, but there is a basis. Biden, who I've been very critical of his campaign, and part of it is this. He is talking about Donald Trump in a way that Donald Trump is not owning up to. He is going to ban abortion federally. He is going to ban IVF. He is implementing Project 2025. We can get into a lot of other subtleties when it comes to that. But either of these two candidates are talking to each other in a way that resembles the other candidates' talking points. But I do believe that we are not informed on the actual contours of a national conversation if our candidates don't talk about each other in a way that even passes a basic fact check from the other candidate. Let's go to former RNC chair Reince Priebus. He is in Milwaukee and spoke to Donald Trump last night.
I want to get right to your conversation. You just spoke with former President Trump. What did he have to say?
Well, I mean, he was grateful. I think that he was grateful for the miracle of what happened, at least in his case, but he was also sad.
Grateful, you mean a miracle that he...
I mean, 1/4 inch turned the other direction, and we're obviously talking about something very different this morning. And
that's the way he saw it. He
Totally. And he also expressed, he was sad about, obviously, the person who had died, he said, you know, he was just sitting there, and now he's gone. And, you know, and I just think that all of those emotions all coming together at once. He talked about, you know, it felt like a knife went through his ear, and then realized very quickly what was happening. But
what did he say how he's now?
Well, I would say he's unwavering.
But his condition?
Oh, strong. I mean, very strong this morning. I mean, he sounds like a person who is ready to go, very strong, unwavering. One of the reasons I was talking to him is because I'm the chair of the host committee in Milwaukee. I wouldn't, you know, I would leave things alone. But he wants to move forward. He was very clear to me, at least for the host committee events, that no, we need to keep moving forward. So
this convention goes forward. It's not going to be scaled back.
No, in fact, if you had to ask me, I would say this convention is going to be epic. And we have a president, obviously through tragedy yesterday, and we had loss of life and hopefully no more. But he is ready to go. And I think the unwavering attitude that he is bringing now to Milwaukee is going to even further energize this crowd. Certainly reflective, you know, in tragedy, God is our refuge, and I think most people feel that way today. But we also, as Americans, have to come out of this and move forward. And there'll be time to reflect, there'll be time to investigate, there'll be time for politics. But today wasn't a day for that, and that certainly wasn't anything the president was talking about. It was just sort of just grateful, unwavering, move forward.
Somebody who was very nearly on stage when the shots rang out yesterday is David McCormick. He is the Republican candidate for Senate in Pennsylvania. Trump was just talking about him and saying that voters at that rally had to vote for him, almost called him up, then said he was going to do it later before he went to his graphics about illegal immigration. McCormick joined ABC's This Week.
Expand on what you were just saying from last night's special. What did you see happen? What did you hear? When did you realize what was going on?
Well, as I said, I was sitting right in the front row, and the shots went off, and it was pretty clear quickly. It was, you know, a huge rally. It was lots of upbeat energy, and it was pretty clear quickly this was a series of shots, and the president went down immediately, and the Secret Service jumped on top of him. And then he got up, and you saw the pictures you're now seeing on TV where his fist came out, and in sort of a measure of, I think, defiance and reassurance and, you know, leadership, he really reassured people that he was okay. But at the same time, over my shoulder, it became clear that someone else had been hit. And sadly, an innocent bystander was knocked over, and it was clear that he was very, very injured and bleeding very badly. And so there were sort of two things going on at the same time, one to my left and one to my right. And the president was you know, taken off the stage, and there was a real confusion of what was going on, whether there were multiple shooters, whether the shooting was done, and really a sad day. The president, you know, an inch difference and the president would have been dead. It was a very scary moment.
You've been out campaigning for months. How have you experienced this toxic environment that we were just talking about with John Cohen, the counterterrorism specialist?
You know, I mostly haven't, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously, we have two very conflicting visions of where to take the country, the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, and President Biden versus President Trump. And so there's a real conflict of ideas. But for the most part, I don't hear extreme rhetoric. And obviously, extreme rhetoric has no place in politics. And, you know, as a father of 6 daughters, it's scary. I spent my night talking to my daughters and reassuring them that their dad's going to be okay, even though he's decided to try to run for public office and serve his country. So this is, you know, this is something that's unacceptable in political life. And it's unacceptable wherever it comes from, and so we have to push back on it. And certainly, it's not hard to imagine that some of the extreme rhetoric we see contributed to the attempt on President Trump and, you know, Steve Scalise and some of these other horrible tragedies that happened, Paul Pelosi. This is unacceptable in American political life, and we need to come together and agree on that.
Yeah, and that your message is being echoed. It was echoed by Speaker Johnson this morning. It was echoed by President Biden. Former President Trump said we have to come together as well. But we've also seen that several top Republicans are also seeking to blame Democrats for this. How do we take the temperature down right now?
Well, I think we first of all have to recognize that we do have a real conflict of ideas. That's okay. You know, our country is faced with very significant choices, and you know, running for office, I believe that we're going in the wrong direction, and so I'm making the case as aggressively as I can that that we need to go in a different direction. That's different than attacking people. That's different than breaking down people. That's different than threatening violence. And so we need to embrace conflict of ideas, conflict in the direction of our country that needs to be addressed at the ballot box. But we don't need to resort and can't resort to violence as a way of promoting political agendas. And I think that certainly the environment contributed, I think, to these acts of violence that we're seeing, not just last night, but others. And it needs to be dialed back across the board.
And finally, Face the Nation, Tom Cotton, on to talk about a lot of the same stuff.
I saw last night Leader McConnell issued a statement in which he said very clearly, violence has no place in our politics. I imagine you would associate yourself with the leader's sentiments?
Of course, Margaret. Unfortunately, we've seen a few instances of violence in recent years. Throughout our history, there's been sporadic spates of violence. It has no place in America or in the American political tradition. Robust, strong campaigns, contrasting ideas between candidates and parties, of course, is central to American democracy. But we settle those differences through political debates and through elections. We don't settle them through violence. So what happened yesterday is extremely regrettable. It's not consistent with the American spirit. And I'm very grateful again that President Trump miraculously survived and is going to move forward with the convention this week and this campaign, because that's how we settle our political differences in America.
I'm going to bring this episode to a close with kind of two sides of the coin. I'm going to do the cynical one first, and that is the effects of this race. You guys come to this show because I give you political analysis and opinion, and so here it is. Donald Trump is going to be very, 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 very hard to vilify for independent voters, the ones that are going to determine this race, especially independent voters in Pennsylvania, where he was almost shot dead. That means that Joe Biden has to take his number one strategy, make this race about Donald Trump being too dangerous to re-inhabit the White House, and he has to change it. I don't particularly see the agency with that campaign to make these kinds of corrections, but my assumption would be that they need to find a policy prescription that can unite their constituencies and move forward. But Donald Trump is a bloodbath chaos dictator who is going to come for all of you. I don't think that he's going to be able to say that without being charged with trying to raise the temperature and potentially cause more violence to his political opponent. Donald Trump's address to the nation, and who knows whether or not he does one early in the RNC before he accepts the nomination, but when he first speaks at the RNC will be the most watched and covered political speech of all time. It's hard to drum up a scenario where somebody who is as much of a headline magnet as Donald Trump, in these circumstances where he is leading, and then barely survives an assassination attempt, only to come to Milwaukee, where 112 years ago, Theodore Roosevelt was shot and finished his speech, and not imagine that it's not going to be a gigantic global press bonanza. Number 3, there's a massive scandal with the Secret Service. This is Butler, Pennsylvania, and the Secret Service did not secure a rooftop where a 20-year-old shooter was able to get on the roof and take 8 shots at the President of the United States. This was not Midtown Manhattan. This was not an advanced drone. This was Butler, a farm area of Butler, Pennsylvania. The President of the United States, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., while I was recording, gave remarks to the nation in which he said that there would be an independent investigation. I can't imagine where this is going. And there have been reports, we will see how efficacious they are, that the Trump campaign has been requesting from the Department of Homeland Security more security. If that was denied, coupled with the White House's refusal to give Bobby Kennedy Jr. more Secret Service protection, well, then there's a larger problem, especially since the man at the top of that organization is Alejandro Mayorkas, somebody who's been a political football already, once impeached by the House. Now let's get to what I think is the more important side of that coin. And that is me and you. The conversation that exists in politics is not something beyond us. It is comprised of us. All of us have a part in it. It's like the center of the Ouija board. We may not feel like we are moving it, but on some level we are, at least in our own infinitesimal way. Politics has become very divided. And it is a part of this show's DNA that hopes to remain a resource for anybody. I want to be a scoreboard. I don't want to be a pep rally. Now, I understand. Sometimes the scoreboard doesn't say what you want, and so you might want to leave so you can beat traffic. And I get it. But I never want for you to think that there is ever a thumb on the scale. I work hard to try to make sure that that is something that you guys get and understand. But I would also say that we are responsible for our own actions. The way that we treat those closest to us are echoed and understood by those around us. Every time we fight with somebody who is freaking out on social media, we are sending a signal to those who are closest to us that this is something that either you should understand as part of my character or that this is okay. So if any of the things that you have heard today, if any of the emotions that you have felt today have made you think about the way you have engaged in the political conversation, just know that kindness begins with everybody. And that while politics is a persuasion field that is designed to divide, because divisions equal motivations to walk into voting booths and to hit one button as opposed to another, that does not mean that it has to infect our lives. Thank you for spending time with me. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And that will wrap it up for us today. Politics, Politics, Politics. Your Sunday edition is brought to you by you. Not only the people who support us at TakePoliticsSeriously.com, but also obviously everybody who listens. This is a big week. It was going to be a big week no matter what. Like I mentioned before, I am heading to Milwaukee tomorrow morning, bright and early, on the 5 o'clock out of Austin. So I'll be up at the crack of dawn, before dawn, actually. I will be covering, who knows how much I'm going to do while I'm out there. I will definitely be live streaming, but it's going to be catch as catch can. What I would encourage you guys to do is obviously to follow this podcast on any of your podcasting platforms. Follow us on YouTube at Politics, 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 Twitch, Justin R. Young, and then, of course, on X, Justin R. Young. I will be streaming on all of those platforms whenever I get a chance. But till then, this is your old pal, Justin Robert Young, saying politics has three names.